Hi there, welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's very special episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called Trap.
The latest film by, I'm trying to think of the right word for it, revered, popular, divisive director M. Night Shyamalan.
All the above?
All the above. If there's one thing you could say, this guy delivers movies. Love him or hate him, and there seems to be a lot of people who enjoy jumping on, I think, the hate train for this stuff. And we've probably talked about it on previous episodes, not necessarily about M. Night, but just like fan-based stuff in general. We don't try and participate in that too much. And if anything, are we like Shyamalan apologists? Like, we appreciate M. Night's movies, right?
I think apologists in the traditional, like, Greek philosopher sense, as in, like, we would defend this position, not apologizing as though we did something wrong.
Yes.
I think I personally, I think we discussed this in our episode on Knock at the Cabin, that we went through his filmography, but it's safe to say we're both fans of M. Night Shyamalan's entire body of work.
Yeah.
Couple missteps notwithstanding.
Well, definitely. And Knock at the Cabin, I think we really did go a lot more in depth on his filmography.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to go do all that again. I was just looking at my notes from that show where I think we even broke down what the ratings were for each one. And really, I mean, this is his follow-up movie, so there's not a lot new to cover in that territory, except
we did a lot of work. We've really let this podcast slip. We're just like, we're really coasting now. So we're getting up to 100. It's like, yeah, we're just resting on our laurels now. It's like, we're not prepping for episodes or anything.
Right? I had 400 words written up on Knock at the Cabin, and I have 0 on Trap. Except for, I do have a note on the Rotten Tomato critic rating IMDb stuff for later in the show.
Yeah.
But, that's neither here nor there. Knock at the Cabin, Trap, M. Night, crazy movies. I was kind of excited to watch this. Seen some of the trailers for it. It looked like an interesting concept. A father and teen daughter attend a pop concert where they realize they're at the center of a dark and sinister event. Okay. I think the trailers kind of gave away the main premise of the film, was that Josh Hartnett is playing a serial killer who is at a concert with his daughter, and the police are aware that that serial killer, identity unknown to them, will be at that concert. So they set up like a major police force, every exit, checking people randomly, all this stuff. And that's the trap, right?
Yeah, I really wish that, I think we were, in our kind of prep for the episode, we were talking and warming up. We were talking about trailers and marketing, and trailers giving too much away. And I really feel like this one, the trailers gave just a little bit too much away. I wish they would have kind of made things more ambiguous, or maybe played with fan expectations. Or maybe they didn't do that specifically, because I think part of the problem is this kind of misalignment of expectations, of people always expecting M. Night Shyamalan movies to have some kind of major plot twist at the end, like specifically The Sixth Sense. I don't even know if Unbreakable you call it a plot twist. It's kind of like a reveal, really. But I think, throughout M. Night Shyamalan's career, and to his credit, he's persevered through all this negativity and all these mismatched expectations. But people have this really clear ideas, like, oh, it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie. It's got to have some kind of big twist at the end that changes turns the entire narrative on its head. And it's like, if you look at most of his movies, they're not like that. There are big reveals about characters or plot, but it's like, it's not always this big twist. And I think that's been to maybe his benefit and detriment in terms of kind of marketing these movies, right?
Yeah, like The Sixth Sense, 1999, with an actual twist. Like, that is a twisty twist that
Twisty McTwisterson
has reverberated through pulp culture it'll keep going. And I think that lends itself to everyone just expecting like the biggest twist in the world when it comes to M. Night. And the fact is, you do not get them in most of the movies. I mean, something like The Village had a twist that was just like, oh, what you were just watching is not actually really what is
Yeah,
actually
it
happening.
recontextualized everything
Yeah.
and kind of
That's a
turned
good.
everything on its head. But like most of them are just like the same things. Like it's a big reveal. Like the character reveals their big backstory, or like a piece of information about themselves or the plot that we didn't know before that adds to the plot. But it's not recontextualizing everything completely, right? Like I would say, like a big twist was like like for example, in this podcast, it's not actually a podcast about trap. It's a podcast about twisters. No, what a twist! Just imagine we just switched halfway through. It turned to a completely different movie. Amazing.
Well, we could definitely head into a conversation about The Watchers, an M. Night
Oh yeah,
produced film directed by his daughter.
yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about that later, but I mean, it's safe to say, just a spoiler warning. Maybe we've kind of dropped a little bit of spoilers beforehand, but I don't really consider them too spoilery because, as you said, they were like essentially in the trailer. But we will talk about spoilers without abandon throughout the recording here. So if you have not watched the movie, check it out, come back and listen to our very insightful insights.
Yeah.
All right, you went to see Trap in theaters. I saw it in theaters. You saw it with your family.
Nice.
Was the whole family like pumped up to go see the latest M. Night film, or did you have to drag them out there kicking and
No, it
screaming?
was it was really strange and also really cool. Um, because my kids are old enough now where they're online and they're being introduced to the ads and they're starting to have opinions about things. My son actually was asking specifically to watch some M Night Shyamalan movies
Nice.
because he's watch like on YouTube like compilations of top tens or whatever, like breakdowns of movies. But yeah, each of my family members individually came to me and were having discussions, and I was like, oh, I heard about this movie Trap, or I saw an ad for this movie Trap. I'm curious to see it. My daughter and my son and my wife all individually, and so like it's like, oh well, let's go. We'll make this a family event because it's not like you know based on kind of the ads and what I'd read, it was more of a kind of a psychological thriller or kind of a cat and mouse kind of narrative than it was like a pure horror movie, like some of M Night Shyamalan's other movies. So I was like, okay, because like some of my family are better with horror movies than others, and it's like okay, some people are better with gore than others, and I was like, okay, and I think this one's going to be okay for the family where my kids are old enough. So no, it was really interesting to see, like back in our day, um, you know, after Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, especially, M Night Shyamalan made a name for himself, and his new films were like it was introduced with like a lot of fanfare, and people had high expectations, and he was well known. Kind of like there was a bit of a lull there, obviously, where fan backlash for not living up to their expectations, et cetera, et cetera. A couple box office flops, whatever. Now there's a whole new generation of people discovering M Night Shyamalan. I think it's from my point of view, kind of a high point ever since The Visit came out, and you have Old and Knock at the Cabin, and now Trap, and really they kind of kind of really return to the kind of pop culture consciousness now. So it was actually really cool to be able to have a older generation of fans. I remember going to see The Village with my wife in the theaters when it first came out, and now I'm bringing my kids to see Trap. So it's kind of neat where it's come full circle. I'm able to share this one of my favorite directors. And with my family, and it wasn't like I forced them to go to the theater with me to watch this. Like I forced my daughter to go see Longlegs with me. Uh, it was an organic thing. It was like such an interesting perspective for me to have as a parent. Now I was like, oh yeah, my kids and I our interests, because they don't always intersect these days as they become teenagers, and they intersected here. It's like, oh, this is really cool. We want to go see this movie together as a family. So it was just it was a really neat experience that way for me personally.
No, that sounds really good. It's it's a testament too that M. Night has been able to somewhat consistently. You mentioned a period of bombs and like say, which we know we're referring to After Earth and The Last Airbender. Uh,
Yeah,
from
which were box office bombs, but I honestly I watched them recently, and I think we covered this on the Knock at the Cabin podcast episode, so go take a look at that. But like I was expecting complete dumpster fires, and they were just like they weren't great films by any means, but they were just like kind of meh for me, middle of the road. They weren't like they were built up to be so terrible, like the most god awful films ever. And it's like they weren't great, and they weren't obviously where M Night Shyamalan his strength lies. Like he's not the guy you go to if you want a big budget blockbuster that's not his own story. You want him telling his own individual like stories that speak to him that he writes himself. Like it's not his strength, but like yeah, it was just it's one of those things. But it was definitely kind of a low point in terms of career, in terms of his kind of market saturation, let's say, in the public consciousness, where people knew about him. It was like you didn't. There was just a period where people just didn't talk about M Night Shyamalan movies anymore, right? For a while there, I felt.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say those are probably like the studio films. A lot of his movies are kind of like self-financed. He plays a big part of that. He's writing and directing most of his movies. And to go back to like 1999 and a bit earlier with some of his earlier films, which I've still yet to see,
Yeah,
but
there's a couple there.
to be, I would say, pretty consistent with delivering like original ideas on screen, well
Yeah,
directed. They have their quirks, but every director has their trademarks, and M Nights are there throughout pretty much all of them. And that's, I don't think you could say that for a lot of directors. Like 25 years later, we're still looking forward to M. Night films when you can't even say that about some directors that were big in the 90s. They're just not making the same amount of content. They're just like it's a different landscape. But yet, M. Night is still able to release these different thrillers that have interesting premises and get people talking about it. Because as much as the public discourse, maybe pop culture discourse, is like berating and like sort of negative on M. Night's films, people go out to see them. They are pretty much financially like successes, right? They're all success stories for the most part. I think going back to that, The Visit, that was like one of the smaller films after those two disastrous box office bombs there. It was just like, all right, self finance, make it a very small story, sort of like a single location film, see what he could do to was financially successful. And then he keeps building up from there again. And now we're all back on the M. Night train of getting like a new release every couple of years. And I mean, I'm interested in knowing what he's going to do in every single movie. We might get a twist, we might just get a reveal, but I want to see what the underlying concept, the underlying premise is of each one. Because, I mean, aside from like doing a bit of a, like with Glass kind of being a bit of a sequel to both Unbreakable and Split, we're not doing like franchise films, or sorry, he's not doing franchise films. He's not really doing a lot of sequels. The ideas are just like standalone, boom, here's your movie, and I'm moving on to the next one.
or if he does a franchise, it's his own franchise from his own brain that he created out of whole cloth. So even
Yeah, yeah.
and that's the I think that's it's interesting to see like the kind of I'm not going to say that Reddit is the the pulse of the generation right, or the pulse of popular culture, but just going onto like the movie subreddits and seeing people is like like there are people like me who are fans of his work, people who hate his work, and then there's an interesting group of people who are like I don't like all of his films or even a lot of his films, but I'm always, going to go in line and buy a ticket because I'm interested to see what he does. And it's like, it's interesting to see, like, oh, I'd rather see M. Night Shyamalan take a big swing and miss than I would, another director just play it completely safe and have something generic, right? It's like, I think that's really cool. And I think, look at, like you were talking about, where, post After Earth and Last Airbender, he comes back. He literally bets on himself. I think he takes out like a mortgage against his house to finance. I think The Visit was really the first one back. Because what was the other one? The elevator one. I think he just produced that one, right?
Yeah, he did not direct The Devil. The Devil? I can't remember. Devils? I don't know. But yeah, the elevator one, he did not direct that.
Yeah, and it's like and that was a huge gap. There was no guarantee that that was going to pay off, right? There was no guarantee that, given the kind of um, the negative feedback based on the past couple of studio films he did, is like, what, it was a huge gamble. I think The Visit was incredibly financially successful, allowed him to get it. I think Old was the next one after that. Or am I missing one in between there?
You're
But that,
missing
like,
a couple. So the release date order goes The Last Airbender, After Earth, The Visit in the year 2015, followed by Split,
oh, of course, Split.
then
Yes, of course.
Glass, then Old.
Yeah, Split and Glass, of course. And then Split was a major one too. Where this is the thing, they made major money because he would keeps the budget small,
Mm-hmm.
high concepts, lower, not a big special effects extravaganza. It's all about the high concept, the really idea, getting people, a couple locations, focus on, get some really good actors in there, given incredible performances, and he makes his money back like multiple times over, where he's the producer and he's the financer of his own movie, so he's able to take that, reinvest it into his next project. And I think that's that's so amazing too. It's like he unlike some other filmmakers who are like really embedded in the studio system, really he is invested in himself. He's invested in the stories he's telling, right? He doesn't he's all that kind of other noise goes away, and love it or hate it, like, he's got a very particular style of directing, in terms of even, the actors, and, I don't know what that style of acting is called. Maybe it's like formalism. I don't know what the actual acting style is. It's a little bit more muted, a little bit more subdued than what we're used to seeing. Might not be your cup of tea, but he's got a clear vision, and he's got a formula that works, in terms of like formula, in terms of not story formula, but like production formula, whereas like he knows how to put out a movie for a reasonable budget that is almost guaranteed to make a profit and allow him to keep doing what he loves. And you can tell that he loves telling these stories. He loves having the opportunity to do this. It's amazing to see that passion. I think that passion shines through and helps carry these movies, right?
It becomes pretty much, I mean, you nailed it right there, especially in today's landscape, which we've harped on numerous times, where originality does not necessarily go rewarded and suffers at the box office. It's like M. Night originality is succeeding. It continues to succeed, and people are showing up for his movies. And I'm happy. I'm happy that there's a very competent director out there who is able to take charge of his own destiny here, and release some stuff that, for the most part, I think vibes with people pretty well. Yeah, as divisive as it could be when you start looking on places like Reddit and other forums.
And that's also why, because it feels almost like he's not. Obviously, he has partnerships with studios to produce and to distribute movies. But it feels like he's outside of the studio system a little bit, like his own kind of independent circle, and that's why, like, we've talked about nepotism both on and off the podcast, um, and in the movie Trap, where he has his daughter, who's, I believe, a musician in real life, and she plays the character Lady Raven, who is like, she's the headliner of this concert that um, the uh, the the bulk of the movie kind of revolves around in terms of the location. Like, yeah, is it nepotism? I guess, but it's also like they're not. This isn't part of like one of the big studios producing this, right? This is M. Night Shyamalan, almost like, I don't know if it's technically considered an independent production, but he's financing a lot himself. He's writing, directing, producing, and it feels a little bit more like he's like, oh, he gets a chance now to work with his daughters. Here's his daughter. I think because his other daughter's a director. I think she was like a second unit director on Old, if I'm recalling correctly. Um, Watching some of the behind the scenes videos there, it was like, it feels, I'm a little bit more forgiving of this, because like it seems a little less cynical, where it seems like, because M. Night Shyamalan is like passionate about telling stories, and he's passionate about, oh, I get to work with my daughter on this movie, and like, sure, it's like, people can be cynical and say it's like, oh yeah, it's like a hour and a half long advertisement to try and boost his daughter's music career. Is like, sure, whatever, but it's like, it feels to me, it's like, I don't know, just in watching the interviews with them on some of the recent um, releases for Old and for I'm going to say Knocked Up, but Knocked at the Cabin. Knocked Up would have been a very different movie had it been directed by M. Night Shyamalan. um, but I don't know. Like, it's still is it is it still nepotism? Sure, but does it feel? It doesn't feel like it feels a bit more genuine and less cynical coming from M. Night Shyamalan. Having looked at you look at what kind of his journey, and you look. I love watching his interviews where he's like you see that passion, and you see even through all the negativity and stuff. I just watched The Happening again last night. I don't remember why I hated that film or remember hating that film. It was a good film. Like
Like
Happening
that one,
was
I would concede. Probably Mark Wahlberg is the worst part of that movie,
he
but
was, but like I remember like even when he says like no what it's like everybody plays it up so it's so exaggerated. I was expecting it was like to be like all cringing at that, and it's like when it came up it was like it's not nearly as bad as I remembered it being. It was so built up in my head, and I'm as guilty as the next person, or as prone as the next person to that kind of group think, that negativity. I wish it's part of the human condition that I have to constantly check and recheck. But like I was watching the behind the scenes video, he's so passionate about, it's like I love this. I thought this was such an interesting concept for a story, and I was like, this is really cool, and that's really cool. And he's so passionate about it. Kind of haters be damned kind of thing. It's like that's amazing. This guy really does love what he's doing, even in Trap, which I wouldn't necessarily say is his best movie. I think it's a little bit of a drop off from Old and Knock at the Cabin. Still pretty solid in my book, but like you can tell, it's like he just loves doing this. It's like you can see the passion there still, right?
I'm glad you're able to articulate what I think pretty much my thoughts on like having the movie revolve around his daughter and even his producing his other daughter's movie is that yeah, it's almost like a family business. It's almost to be expected that you would get your kids in. It's like one of them's not necessarily an actress and he's just pulling in favors that they're showing up in other people's movies or anything. It's like, no, I'm going to write a movie with the idea being that it's going to showcase his daughter's singing talents and like probably serve as a bit of a stepping stone, presumably towards her singing career here. And it's like he's still writing it fully original. It's not just like a bit part for her. And it's like there's still a very competent movie surrounding the reasonings behind why Trap is what it is, right?
Yeah, and like if you're gonna be honest, like is she the greatest actor in the world? Because like has a bigger part later on in the movie. She's not the best actor I've seen. She's not the worst either. She was doing a really solid job. I think it's like one of those things. Like obviously, it comes with practice, right? And some people are gonna like any other skill. Some people are gonna have like gonna slip into it kind of easier than others. But like I think she did really solid job. Um, for that back third of the movie, there is like I don't know. Didn't there's nothing that really took me out of it, right? I don't know.
Yeah. I gotta say this. I'm not in the scene like the pop culture, sorry, the pop singer music world. That is not my scene. And when I'm watching this movie and they are doing like this performance, and I'm not fully aware yet that it is his daughter doing this,
Yeah,
I'm just like, is this a real singer? Is this a real like act? Are these real songs? I'm like, who wrote these songs for the movie? And then finding out afterwards, like, oh yeah, she had a studio album like last year. I don't know if all these songs are from that. Maybe this is like leading into another
no,
album.
I think
But
she wrote these songs for the movie and she performed them herself. It's like I'm going to say too is like I'm not usually big on like pop songs and stuff. It's like those songs are all pretty catchy. Like
yeah, like when you're featuring music and whatnot in a movie like that, there's a chance for it to go like pretty sideways, right? But this one, it definitely felt like pretty genuine. And I don't want to say fooled because she is an actual artist, but I was just like, is this an actor playing a musician? Like who is this? And I was glad that, she has talent. And like you said, the acting afterwards was fine. I don't expect a lot out of him. And I think you've hinted at it before where like even Mark Wahlberg, you know, I don't think he's the greatest actor and he felt a little misplaced in The Happening. M. Night has a way of presenting his characters that takes a specific way of acting on screen. Like
It's
there's
a
a
very
certain like
specific
heightened realism
tone.
to him, right?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's kind of it's stylized, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
stylized kind of acting where like I think we got so hung up as audiences, we got so sold on this naturalistic form of acting where everything has to be like, oh, how would it be in real life? It's like real world is like, no, man. Like you come from like the world of theater and stage, and you get into like things like melodrama because you have to project to the end of the room, right? And you can't do that kind of subtle thing and like there's so many different ways and different schools of thought on acting and I think it makes me a little bit sad or a little bit frustrated sometimes like people are like kind of focus on this one kind of school of acting or one narrow range of what it means to be like oh a good actor or good acting and then you see then it primes people so that when something like M. Night Shyamalan's film comes out and it's very stylized kind of heightened reality sometimes and people are like oh they're the bad acting or it's terrible acting. It's like no man you look at I just watched Signs recently and Mel Gibson and other directors would have made him say would have told him to go more bigger bigger and M. Night Shyamalan's always like no make it smaller bring it in make it feels like more intimate but you can still see like you get an actor like Mel Gibson and like the emotion he shows within that very kind of formal defined acting styles like you can still get an incredible emotional performance right
Like, and uh, going back to the Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis, right? I mean, in the '90s, we grew up with him as the action star, but in the
yeah
'80s, he was from like the television comedy world, and
moonlighting
casting
yeah
him in Die Hard was like a stretch at the time, right? And then we see him in Sixth Sense, and you're like, Bruce Willis, he can't do these like a subtle role like that. Like, who knocked it out of the park? And I think it takes a talent like M. Night to be able to direct an actor to do that and, give us the unexpected. Um, we got to talk about Josh Hartnett in this role, who
Josh
I
Hartnett
feel
is
like,
back baby
yeah, I feel like he's having a bit of a comeback here. And he's fantastic. And it's like, part of the trailer is already broken to you that like he is the serial killer who is trapped, right? So it's like it's an interesting layered performance where he's a serial killer trying to act like a normal person who is like a family guy, like he loves his family and everything. But I love these scenes where like he's talking to the vendors and he's like trying to be sneaky, but he comes across like as a kind of a weirdo. Like the serial killer doesn't know exactly how normal people act, but guess what? You've already been acting like a normal person by like being there with your daughter and just being like this dad, before the show and stuff, right? It's like he should continue to act that way. As I thought it was an interesting layered performance from him there.
yeah no it was really cool to see like whether you define it as like a sociopath or a psychopath or I know we're not psychologists and I know those terms have you know I don't know what the actual terminology is, like pop culture versus actual psychology. We're not psychologists. We can't speak intelligently to that. But it was really interesting, like you said, to see somebody like a psychopath or a sociopath. And you see like that when he lets that mask slip or he puts the mask back on, right? Of like the mask being like, oh, what is a normal, you know, person in a kind of a socialized person in like a normative range of empathy, right? Because like one of the defining traits of I just said I wasn't a psychologist. Now I'm gonna define psychopathy and stuff. But it's like it's a lack of empathy, a lack of being able to feel what other people are feeling or understand the consequences of your actions on other people, right? And so like when he you know in terms of like there's that self-preservation mode and that kind of psychopath sociopath mode and you see like there's certain times where like it's just really subtle acting from Josh Hartnett where you see like he puts the mask back on or puts it on but it really feels like he's playing a part for the world to see. Also gonna refute your statement made I know it wasn't um, intentionally against Josh Hartnett but he's not making a comeback. I think he left took a step back intentionally from the movie industry, I think to take care of his family and whatnot, spend time with his
So
family.
he's coming back to acting.
Not that he ever went anywhere,
Not that he
but
ever
no,
went anywhere,
but
but
no, like in my
yeah, I
mind
know
when
what you mean. Yeah,
in my mind when I hear a comeback, it's like oh somebody had a fall from grace, or they had a couple bucks on his bombs, but it's like it was him kind of taking a
yeah,
step
I
back from the
definitely did
industry
not.
intentionally. And I know that wasn't your intent,
Yeah,
but I just want to in case Josh
correct me,
Hartnett hears
anyways.
this, like we've always been fans, and it's like I always want to show that kind of appreciation for like him people like him, people like Rick Moranis, who like intentionally they could have pushed it further. They could have stayed in the limelight and made a bunch more money, had a bunch more fame. But it's like no, they had like you know what they had families. Take and it's like I'm gonna take time back, a step away from my career because I have the resources to do it. Right, spend time with their families, and now you know the kids grow up, and it's like oh, I can get back into doing this not because I need the money, because I love to do this. Right, so seeing him turn up like in was it Wrath of Man a couple years back, and then was it Operation Fortune? I think he was into a couple of Guy Ritchie movies there, and then to see him in the Shyamalan movies, like this is great. I love to see I think like a lot of people. I don't want to speak for other people. Actually, I'll speak for myself. I took Josh Hartnett for granted. I don't think I realized how talented he was back in the was it late '90s, early 2000s when he was really kind of big and the kind of heartthrob. I think it wasn't until maybe it was like Lucky Number 11 when I was like, oh, this kid isn't just like the heartthrob from teen movies. This kid can actually act. Like, he's super talented. Or even Alien, not Alien, Alien Resurrection. H2O. I was thinking Halloween Resurrection, but it was actually H2O where he played the son of Jamie Lee Curtis there. So he's embedded in the Halloween franchise as well. One of the timelines anyway. The Court of Thorns or whatever it was.
So not a comeback, maybe just a return to acting.
Hartnett returns.
Hartnett returns. So what were we talking about? Hartnett, he's on top of his game in this movie. He's doing well. He seems to fit well with that M. Night, sensibility of what he needs out of his actors. His daughter, Ariel Donoghue, I don't recognize her from anything. Maybe she's more of a TV star. And then you have, obviously, M. Night's daughter. It was billed Saleka, I think is her stage name. And then Alison Pill later on in the movie.
I saw Alison Pill's name in the opening credits. I was like, and I was waiting for her to show up. I was like, she's going to be the mom, obviously. So I was like, that's part of it too. Is like, I knew Alison Pill was. I love Alison Pill, her acting. That is, I don't know her personally, obviously. But Alison, if you're free, give me a call sometime. We can have lunch. But no, like, I love her performances, and it's like I was waiting for her to show up. I was like, she's not showing up. I was like, okay, so she's the mom at home. I was like, okay, I was anticipating her coming on screen and seeing what she can do, and she knocked it out of the park as she always does.
So like basically the movie is kind of split in half in a way. In that the first half of the movie is at the concert venue. It's a split trap. Oh boy.
It's a trap.
Oh boy.
That's all I can think of too. The movie is like Admiral Akbar. It's a trap. I'm sorry.
I'm surprised there must be a take out there of Josh Hartnett saying that in an Admiral Akbar impersonation.
There had to have been people on set, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Or did they use "Caught in a Trap" in the advertising? I can't remember. Slowed down, creepy version of "Caught in a Trap." They must have at some point. Like that was right there for the marketing team. Come on.
What is "Caught in the Trap"?
You ever heard that before? Hold on.
Is it a song?
Yeah.
Like an old song?
Suspicious Minds by Elvis Presley. So the name of the song isn't Caught in a Trap, it's Suspicious Minds. But one of the lyrics is Caught in a Trap.
Wouldn't that have been great if Lady Raven did a cover of an Elvis Presley song talking
Suspicious
about
Minds?
traps?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great? M. Night, you really failed us.
You've done it again!
But yeah, I mean, basically trying to get back to my point here of the movie being, these two different acts where he's at home, and that's where like a lot of the tension is at now because he's brought Lady Raven with him. He's trying to get rid of her. She's trying to protect this guy who's stuck in a basement in one of Josh Hartnett's basements. I can't remember the character, Cooper. One of Cooper's basements, I guess.
Coop.
And I think that's where, generally the movie, I don't want to say fully falls apart, but that's where you start losing me quite a bit. Oh,
really?
It felt like a few false endings throughout that sequence. You know what I mean? It was almost just going on a little too long for me or something. I'm not sure, but the movie started losing me around that time. Not necessarily like right when they got home, but it was like, all right, you know what? They're getting out of the car, they're escaping now. Now he's in the limo with Lady Raven. But I also did appreciate that it's like, she manages to get out, and he also manages to escape the limo, even surrounded by all the security and police and stuff. And then we just like keep going and going. But I was happy that like, Lady Raven at that time did come back. Like she's safe with the police. She's not leaving. She's smart. She's good.
Yeah, she didn't go out of like, no, I gotta go stop him. It's like,
Yeah,
no, I'm out.
I'm
I'm
out.
good.
Yeah.
I'm good, pal. Like, yeah, I'll let the cops, I'll let the professionals handle it from here. It's all yours.
It almost becomes a bit of a stretch for me when she's posted on her social media of just like, all right, we're looking for a house in this city with a blue door or something, and there's a lion statue nearby. I'm like, you're losing me on those types of details.
Yeah, I mean, there's a suspension of disbelief that the internet isn't full of scumbags who would just be posting, asking her to take her top off or something stupid, right? Which is what would really happen on the internet. Is like, oh, it's her live, and it was like, yeah, say something about the Israeli-Palestine conflict, you coward. Be all like nonsense stuff like this in real life if you posted something like that. I don't think people in general would have been that helpful on social media.
Maybe her true fans are like paying for like they're paying to have like their comments elevated in the chat window, and they're the truly helpful ones.
The people who are rich enough to afford to pay for play. What does that say? What kind of social commentary? See, there's layers on layers here.
Oh, jeez.
I thought, like, yeah, I mean, I wish they'd spent more time with the kind of cat and mouse game in the arena. That felt like the real meat of the movie. I think you're right. Um, you know, it was interesting kind of seeing. I think if they had cut that second half or second third down to maybe like a quarter, like all the post arena stuff. Yeah, I think there's some tightening that could have been done to because what we really want to get to is like, yeah, they discover that Josh Hartnett is his family discovers this. The police, everyone knows who he is now. He has a little bit of like, they rescue that dude in the basement, and then he has that conversation with his wife Alison Pill, who it's revealed again, not a twist. It's revealed that she set him up because or she kind of tipped off the police, because she knew that he was gonna be there, and she was just like she had these warning signs that she suspected him of being the killer, but she didn't want to believe it as her. She didn't want to, of course, like any of us, they wouldn't want to believe that our significant other that we spent, obviously, potentially like 20 years of our life with is like secretly a serial killer. So she tips off the police, hoping that they'll actually disprove that, she was wrong and that he's not actually the killer, or, on the worst case scenario that if he is the killer, he'll get caught before he can get back home with the family. But that performance, like those beats, I think, yeah, and then the ending too, when the police get him, they take him down, and he goes outside, and he goes over to fix the bike. He's like, okay, and he says the family's like all shook up, and he's like surrounded by a police guard, or like 20 police to get him into the. I don't know, as Mel Gibson in Signs would say, paddy wagon. But the police.
You haven't watched a lot of them night films lately.
Yeah. But I wish when they did that zoom in on the bicycle to show that the spoke was missing, it's like, okay, he's got the spoke. He's obviously going to plan some kind of escape, so the cat and mouse game is going to still go on. But then it cuts back to him in the back of the police. What do you call that vehicle?
It's like just like a prisoner transport. Like it's just a
prisoner transport. Perfect. And it shows him picking the lock. It's like he didn't. I get it. You didn't have to show him picking a lock. You can trust the audience. You can just like zoom in on the bicycle wheels. Like, okay, he's not over. He might possibly escape. He might still be out there. But I think I understand why he wanted to end on that scene, because that look that Josh Hartnett gives, he picks the lock and the camera's on his face, and it's just like this beautifully horrific, psychotic smile, and he starts laughing, and it's just like, that's a performance and a half. It's like, you gotta find a way to throw that in the movie. I get it, M. Night. I get it. But from a purely kind of editing storytelling standpoint, you should have ended on the spoke missing from the tire, right? It's like, we all get it. We audience understands like, oh, he stole that. He's gonna pick the lock and escape, etc., etc. But yeah, like that, I get it. It's like you need to. That was an amazing shot. It's like if I were M Night Shyamalan, I would have done the same thing. It's like I'm gonna throw. I don't care where it goes in. I'm gonna throw that into the movie. Doesn't matter. It's a great performance and a great shot. So I can forgive it.
And that's the thing about these movies, not just M. Night's, but movies in general. Is like sometimes you just got to put in stuff that looks cool because it's cool. It's not necessarily like plot driven
Cool,
or anything.
baby.
Like, this is a medium. But I did have a thought after the credits started rolling. I was just like, in another world, we would see like after like in the end credits or after credits, Josh Hartnett's character escaping the
Oh yeah.
and then it would cut to Bruce Willis sitting in a bar, hearing the news about the serial killer on the loose, and he puts down his $5 tip or whatever, and he's like, "I got this."
Were you waiting for this to be another surprise sequel to Unbreakable?
But that's the thing. Like every time I think about it now, when I watch that, it's just like, oh, this is again like in the same city, like in Philly, and it's another villain who's doing horrible things. And Split it set the precedent. So I'm just like, yeah, could still very well be.
Not everything is
universe.
a shared universe, Brian. You you have been so conditioned by Marvel and Star Wars, and everything's gotta be connected. Just like, no, man, they're just like cool ideas. Just cool idea for a movie.
Yeah,
And he does it, moves on. I think the only exception to that was Unbreakable, Split, and Glass, and even those ones, like without that scene at the end of Split, you could have that as a standalone movie and it still works, right?
well, that's going back to that. I've always been upset that that movie, that end scene, took away from Split, but it deserved to be in its own like post credits thing, which I've probably talked about too many times. But I literally feel the same way about this. What a great way to introduce an interesting villain is to give him a full featured film, and then at the end be like, yeah, we're gonna be like seeing this guy again type of thing, fighting our hero from
because
before.
You always see the hero's origin story, but not always the villain's origin story. So it was like it or hate it. It was a really cool idea and a really twist. Like you don't see that very often, right?
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. I mean, you talk about the MCU, and then you talk about, say, Sony trying to make their Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man, and they keep doing villain origin movies. And it's like, guys, maybe take a note from M. Night here. Like, make a villain origin story, and then just tie it in later some way if they ever get access to the use Spider-Man on screen again.
It's like, can we technically call this a movie? It's like, sure, Kraven the Hunter. Technically, Madam Web is a movie. It's got actors on a set that have been recorded that we can then cut together. Does that technically make a movie? Sure, I guess.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, no, I will concede. I think, I don't know. I get the impression I enjoyed this maybe a little bit more than you. I don't know. Maybe we're on the same page. But I will concede maybe that last portion. I had more fun when they were in the arena during the concert.
Yeah, no,
as well,
I think that's
to
the
be
point,
honest.
is that was the fun part of the film. That was good.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting too. I was watching special features. I can't remember which movie it was of his, but I think too they always associate him with the horror genre, even though I was like, that's not always the case. Like he's like, I don't consider myself like a horror director. It's like I do genre pictures, and you look back, it's like, oh yeah, like a lot of it's like sci-fi, but not necessarily. It's not all necessarily horror, right? He plays around, in this case, it wasn't. I don't think Trap would be called a horror movie. It'd be like
This is
a
a
thriller,
crime thriller.
crime thriller. Yeah, Old was like a high concept sci-fi. Um, Knock at the Cabin might be considered kind of sci-fi / maybe a little bit of horror in there, but it's not. He's not like a pure horror director like I would think of like um who would be like a pure horror director. I don't even know. Like Ari Aster, maybe these days. I would consider him like or I guess Jordan Peele, right? Jordan Peele does horror movies, right? Which is like imagine going back, 15 years and telling people that. It's like that sentence doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the guy from Key and Peele is a horror movie director. They're talking crazy. But
just looking up Old. yeah, thriller mystery. Oh, they do classify as horror. I mean, what's happening to them is scary, but that that doesn't really like that doesn't
Yeah, it's
shock
not
me
a.
at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify it as, but like, and that's an interesting thought. Like, M. Night Shyamalan doesn't consider himself a horror director. He has this idea. He has these ideas that he wants to explore, and I think some of them skew more towards horror. But he's not purely like a horror director. Even look at The Sixth Sense. I don't think it's there's some scary scenes, but then I remember watching The Sixth Sense and like, oh yeah, the I think Misha Barton played that ghost of that young girl, and it was really interesting how at the beginning when he's like, the young child was played by that very famous child actor whose name I definitely know, and I'm going to say
Haley
any
Joel
second
Osment?
now. Haley Joel Osment, which I definitely did not forget. Um, Haley Joel Osment's character is like at the beginning, he's afraid of all these ghosts, and then he starts actually talking to them and realizes like, oh, they're not all that scary. Some people are just like they're people, and they're kind of stuck in this, in between. And I remember that scene talking to Misha Barton's ghost character, and I was like, oh, this isn't really a horror movie. It's a kind of more kind of high concept, maybe. I don't know what you classify that as, like sci-fi then, or fantasy or something, right? It's like, oh, yeah, it's not really a horror movie, right? It's a more, or maybe like more of like a family drama kind of thing, right? But with like a sci-fi kind of trapping. So it's interesting, like, and watching his films in that context, like, yeah, he doesn't see himself as a horror director. Is like, and that's a misconception from the audience. So again, there's this misalignment between audience expectations and what's actually being delivered, which I think again potentially hurts in terms of potential audiences, right?
What were some of the? Did you have anything else to add here before we sort of talk about reviews and ratings and whatnot?
I think we covered it. Like all the acting, like Josh Hartnett, I think was
Oh, there's
obviously
one
the
other
standout.
thing I wanted to mention, which I wanted more of, is that the FBI profiler, played by Haley Mills, this is Dr. Josephine Grant. I thought maybe I wanted more of her and like Cooper, like Josh Hartnett, like interacting in a way. Like I needed more of her like throughout the
Like
story.
the
Like
kind
we
of
get bits of her
intellectual kind of chess match kind of going on between the cat and mouse game. Yeah, yeah, I
because
think so.
like she
Yeah, they're kind
seemed
of
like such
fleshed
an
out.
established actress. I'm just like this lady has a presence on screen and
Yes.
she's doing like really well here. I'm like I'm intrigued by this character. Maybe we'll get more movies from Shyamalan starring her as an FBI profiler.
Yeah, the Tommy Lee Jones effect. We have to go from the fugitive to
Yeah,
U.S.
yeah.
Marshals. If all the character. I did want to. There's one scene in particular. Speaking of like the psychology of the character, I think there was hints of Psycho in this as well. I think you can see kind of that. I don't know. I don't want to speak for M Night, but I think there's some Hitchcockian elements here. But it's really interesting how when Lady Raven he's got her in his car and he's like, oh, we're gonna go. He thinks he's still got the upper hand, and she starts pretending to be his mother because she remembers the kind of psychological profile that the cops gave her about this guy, and she's pretending to be his mother, and it's like, oh, I've always been disappointed in you, or you've always been weak, trying to like get the upper hand and throw him off his game. He's like, it looks like he's kind of breaking down, and it might be working, and then he does his things like, yeah, and he's like, no, I don't think we're gonna do that, and he looks at her mother. It's like he knows what she's trying to do, so it's like I love that this is constantly kind of power dynamics shifting with the. I thought it was like kind of a neat kind of twist on a classic scene, right?
You should have seen Nathan's face as he said twist.
Yeah, but like I think that was a good. It was one of the better displays of M Night Shyamalan's daughter acting. What's her name? I don't want to call her M Night Shyamalan's daughter. That feels
Well, she's
reductive.
credited as Saleka. Her real name, I don't know.
Saleka. We'll call it Saleka. That's fine. I don't want to just call her M Night Shyamalan's daughter. That felt
So
really
I
kind
feel
of
like she was
reductive or dismissive.
credited in the movie under her real name, but all I see in Letterboxd is Saleka. But that's fine.
Saleka is fine. Yeah, Saleka. I think that was one of the better performances by Saleka in that scene. I thought it was great. Kind of. Again, I love those elements of the movie where it was like that cat and mouse back and forth. Who has the upper hand? And like Josh Hartnett's serial killer is like, oh, I'm gonna escape this way, and then he's like, goes out this door. It's like, nope, there's a bunch of cops up. They got this route covered, and like they got this contingency covered. It's like, oh, how's he gonna get out of this? And I was like, I wasn't rooting for him to get away, but you're thinking in your head is like, oh, how is he gonna get out of this one, or how is he gonna get around this obstacle? It was really neat.
Yeah, it's funny because as the main character of the movie, you kind of want to see him escape. And you're like, oh, how is he really going to do this? This should be good. But just to reaffirm that he's truly a bad dude, he like pushes this girl down the stairs nonchalantly and it's just like to cause a commotion so he could just like walk the other. And you're like, damn, like she's going to be hurting him, like if not like broken everything afterwards. Is like, damn, this guy's cold. And then putting that bottle in the deep fryer and it explodes in the girl's face. Like zero remorse, like no empathy at all.
Oh, it establishes him as a pure kind of psychopath, sociopath. Yeah. It's like, yeah, he will do anything to save himself or his clan, I guess. Maybe I don't know I don't know about the psychology, if you can actually be a psychopath or sociopath and have zero bonds or zero empathy for other people, but still have some kind of instinct to protect your own kind of herd, like your own kids.
The only other element I wanted to say was his wife, Alison Pill, playing his wife. She suspects that he is the killer and gives this tip to the police that, yeah, this guy is going to be at this concert. Surely, I mean, this is me like talking from like 40,000 feet of nonsense. Surely you could tell, like, she could tell the police, hey, listen, I think he's going to be at this store, at the grocery store by himself at this specific time, instead of a concert venue with 30,000 people in it. And he's with his daughter, who he could use as some kind of like bargaining chip or something if he's being caught. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's a pretty dicey situation to put her daughter into.
I think specifically the evidence that, that led them to it was a ticket to that concert that was at one of these houses.
That's right.
So I think she called in the location. The cops went, found this ticket stub there, and they deduced that this was one of the potential hideouts for the killer. And so it was a very roundabout. She didn't call like Crime Stoppers or anything. It was a very kind of roundabout way. But yeah, for sure. Like if you're gonna apply real world logic to any movie, then it's like, yeah, of course. Would we do anything? But it's like to quote the pitch meetings, Ryan George is like, why did they do it this way? So the movie could happen. Yeah, of course.
How did you feel about the movie taking place at the Toronto Rogers Centre, aka the Sky Dome?
Yeah, it was pretty cool actually. I knew that they'd filmed down there, because I knew some people locally whose kids were extras in the crowd. So it's kind of it's interesting, like the market. As soon as you start filming something in Toronto, and it's like it is all of a sudden, we start playing 6 Degrees of Separation in Canada. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, it's like I know a person whose cousin worked on this movie. It's like, oh, in the Incredible Hulk, you can see Sam the Record Man in the background. But it's like, you know what? I love seeing that kind of stuff. As a Canadian, is like that makes me love the movie more. But yeah, I don't know if that would take people out. I don't know how our stadiums look significantly different in the States and Canada. I don't know if there was something in the background that would have given it away as in Canada and not in Philadelphia. I don't know, but I was also kind of looking when we were filming and showing shots of the streets outside. It's like, do I recognize any shots in Toronto? Like, was it all filmed in Toronto? Like, do I recognize that street downtown? And I was like, I don't know if I was like faking myself out, thinking it's like, oh, I think I recognize that, or whether it actually was. I have been there before. I don't know.
I could definitely see that, like, you start looking for locations, real life stuff. I could see that removing you from an element of the film for sure. But I remember seeing like the trailer, and you sort of recognize like the old Sky Dome, like concrete, venue, like the especially the vendor area, which is just kind of neat. But it is what it is. But we got to get into our ratings of the movie, and before we do, we got to play our guessing game. Guess the ratings out there. Play along at home. We're going to force Nathan to guess what these critic rating and audience user averages are. We'll start
You can be sure that I haven't looked them up because I honestly don't care.
Do you even want to do this?
Yeah, no, it's a fun game still. I
It's
usually
quick.
don't look them up as often as Brian does. Brian, he wants to go with the crowd all the time. He's got to see whether
That's right.
his opinions are popular or not.
I
You're like
seek
one of the
validation.
plastics in Mean Girls, Brian.
I need my validation. All right, Rotten Tomato critic. Rotten Tomatoes uses 0 to 100%. Was the Rotten Tomato critic rating on this film?
This one's a little bit lower probably than the last couple. I don't know. I will go like 65 as my gut instinct.
That's lower. All right, you got to go lower. It's 55%.
My next guess was 54. I should have gone with my second gut instinct.
How about the audience rating on Rotten Tomato?
Let's see. Oh, I don't know. I'll go 60.
65%. You're pretty close.
Okay.
The IMDb user average is a 10-point scale. What is its average?
IMDb. Let's go 5.7.
Like close, but not close. 6.2.
Okay. It's higher than I thought.
Off,
Okay.
yeah. And then Letterbox, which basically, is where we log all our activity. Its users are on the 5-star system. What is the Letterbox user average right now?
Average, I'll say 2.7.
Very close, 2.9.
Okay.
So we got to give our ratings. And as I just mentioned, we use the Letterbox rating system. We have 5 stars with a possible heart-like bonus on top. Where does Trap land on your rating scale?
Yeah, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought this was, I don't know. I really enjoy M. Night Shyamalan's work. We talked about this ad nauseum did we do an episode for Old as well as Knock at the Cabin? I talked about my love of his movie, so I'm always going to be biased towards his stuff. But I thought it was a really cool idea. Some really great performances, especially by obviously Josh Hartnett, really anchoring this thing. Is it his best work in recent years? Thinking about Split, Split, Glass, Old, Knock at the Cabin. It's not his best work. It's also not his worst. I think it was perfectly serviceable. Like 3.5 to me is like above average, but not great. I guess it was. I enjoyed it. What was your overall rating here out of 5?
I think I just got it. Glass is preceded by Unbreakable, Unbreakable Glass, and Split Glass.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh my god! It's like we need to post. It's the mind blown GIF from Scanners.
This is just proof Shyamalan is working on a whole other level. Oh my god! I can't even concentrate anymore.
Was I in Glass? Are we in an M. Night Shyamalan movie right now? This is just M. Night Shyamalan's world, baby.
Oh my god!
We're just here to play.
Like I am unsettled right now. So I gave Trap 3 stars.
Okay. So we're not that far off then.
It's not that far off, and it's one of these things where I think I've been a little harder on movies lately, and this happens. Sometimes I look at ratings I did like 8 years ago, and it's like, man, I can't believe I'd give this movie, 2 stars out of 5 or whatever. And it's like, sometimes you go through phases where you're just a little extra critical about things, and here's a situation where I do enjoy M. Night movies, and I liked going out to see this. I will be watching this again. I'll probably end up buying it at some point, and it'll probably escalate in on the scale. 3 stars right now, and it could have easily been 3.5. It's kind of a toss-up, but 3 stars at the moment.
Yeah, that's just a solid rating. We both enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite M. Night Shyamalan film. It wasn't my least favorite. It was, it was it was an enjoyable way to spend, an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. Didn't feel that long.
Yeah, 105 minutes long.
105, okay, yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah. It's perfect, there you go. There's your... take it out of context. What do you think about Trap? It's perfect.
Put that on the movie poster.
I'm going to use it as your ringtone from now. I'm going to take that extract. It's like, when you recall me, it's like, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. So yeah, kids, get out there, go see Trap, go support, original visions and original movies. Even if you don't end up liking this one, you might like the next one, and the more you support original voices like M. Night Shyamalan, the more original work we're going to see, and the more chance there's going to be something out there that's going to speak to you.
Well said.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. That's a trap.
That's a trap. It's a trap.
As always, we appreciate you hanging out with us today and taking the time to listen to our podcast. You can find us online over at realfilmchronicles.com, where we have not just a repository of podcast episodes, but many of our written reviews as well. If you're up to it, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram as well. All the links should be within the show notes here. So until next time, take care of yourself and others, and be sure to enjoy your film journey.